Welcome back into the Bangtan Universe wormhole. This is Karen, your once and future host. I've come out of retirement because now that BTS has put out a second music video with obvious connections to the BU, I just can't help myself. I have to talk about the merry-go-round video, so let's dive in. We'll start with a quick discussion about horses, since the MV is full of them. The horses in merry-go-round are more than just references to merry-go-rounds. They're here because, according to Chinese astrology, 2026 is the year of the fire horse, also known as the year of the red horse. And that means a lot both for BTS and the BU. Here's some information I found on Korea Herald's website. According to Chinese astrology, the fire horse symbolizes energy, ambition, and change. And, quote, its energy encourages enthusiasm, resilience, and a spirited approach to new surroundings, both personally and socially. You can see how this relates to BTS's reunion, new album, and concert tour, whether or not they believe in astrology. It fits the circumstances. And how does the fire horse relate to the BU? Well, fire and the color red are associated with Yoongi, and I've already predicted in my discussion of the Swim MV that he'll be an important player in the next era of the BU. We'll find more evidence of his importance in the discussion of this MV. Finally, on a more general note, BTS gave us a fire horse Easter egg all the way back in 2019 during this Dionysus performance. Check it out. Now let's get into the merry-go-round MV, one section at a time. You've probably noticed this large centerpiece already. It's our first reference to the BU in this video, and it's a very obvious one. We first saw You Never Walk Alone on the merry-go-round in Spring Day, and in BTS's Studio Notes video, Jimin actually said ARMY would compare merry-go-round to Spring Day. Now let's focus on the dark oval in the centerpiece. Its reflective surface and the frame around it make it look almost, but not quite, like a mirror. And mirrors are hugely important to the BU. Whenever a character looks in a mirror, he confronts himself, focusing on his deepest flaws and his deepest strengths. So if this decoration is a kind of mirror, it's a dark one. That could mean the next era will show our characters confronting their shadows. That would make sense, considering that BTS put out a mini-album called Persona, and they intended to make that the first in a trilogy exploring the Jungian archetypes of persona, shadow, and ego. In the end, they didn't have time to make a trilogy, but they might be still following its structure in a looser way. If that's the case, we've reached the shadow era. But I'm just guessing about that. Don't put too much stock in the idea. Yet. Now let's dig into the various scenes of the MV. They're all set in enclosed spaces with no sign of the real outside world until the end of the video, with one exception. And the members are usually alone. All of this tracks with our predictions about the new era. We said the cat would separate our heroes across space, time, and the multiverse. And in this MV, we definitely see them separated by space, internal spaces, which might be metaphors for other things, but I'll talk about that as we go along. I've also found hints in the MV about their separation by time and the multiverse, and I'll get to those very soon. This first scene is a quick one, since all we see is a miniature merry-go-round floating around in an empty room, but it has a lot of hidden meaning. First, ask yourself why we only see a portion of this room, visible through a peephole lens that distorts our perspective. Well, Suga used an actual peephole lens in one of the VCRs from his D-Day concert. And all of his VCRs were full of references to the BU. And you know how long I've been harping about telescopes, microscopes, and magnifying glasses in the BU. Each of these devices produces a circular field of view, similar to what we see here, but the fisheye lens makes the merry-go-round look very far away. That and the fact that it's floating hint at the end of the MV when you find out BTS are in outer space. Of course, Hosik has his own personal connection with the merry-go-round, and we'll get into that later. The last thing I want to point out before we move on is an Easter egg connected to a famous science fiction movie. This floating, bobbing object with its bright lights looks kind of like one of the UFOs from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Keep that in mind because I'm going to reference another science fiction film at the end of this video, and I think that one is intentionally referenced at the end. Moving on, we find Jungkook in a room full of merry-go-round horses, another reference to this scene from Spring Day. and also to Hobie's scenes in the Fake Love MV. It's hard to count the horses because A, they're all half buried in a dark room, so it's hard to know what you're looking at, and B, counting the poles is no help because some of them are broken in two. Fortunately, the Spotify Korea making-of video shows the scene in color. Now we can count the horses, and there are 7 of them, just as you'd expect. But this horse isn't in a circle with the others, and it's facing a wall. It represents Jungkook, who was estranged from the others at the end of Notes 2, then tossed in a gooey limbo, all thanks to the cat. Taehyung's room is behind Jungkook's, and that's interesting because later on we'll see all 7 members in connecting rooms, and Taehyung's room will be in front of Jungkook's. In other words, our point of view will be the mirror image of what it is here, and that's not coincidence. I have more mirroring to show you as we go along, but let's focus on Taehyung's room for now. The plants in here might or might not be the kind we saw in the Wings era video for reflection. If they are the same kind of plants, then we have another connection between Taehyung and Namjoon. That wouldn't be surprising considering their history in the BU and the fact that a lot of this MV is about the characters' histories. But I'm not sure that these are the same kind of plants. I'm only sure Taehyung is connected to a horse. Now here's Jimin wandering around what looks like an abandoned storehouse. It's possible that all the rooms in this MV are connected in this storehouse, especially considering that they're all connected in the end by the spaceship. Anyway, as for Jimin, he's following the mini merry-go-round that we saw in the first scene. And that's important because no one else in the MV ever sees that merry-go-round. Jimin's ability not only to see it, but to interact with it by following it, suggests that he'll have a special ability in the new era. And that's what Q and I have been saying for a long time. Jimin did a lot of searching and finding in Notes 2, including digging up hidden histories on the internet and finding a bit of graffiti that cracked the whole story. And here's something else that proves Jimin is special. You can see stars in the window as he walks past, but you can't see them anywhere else until we end the video with the spaceship. These stars foreshadow that spaceship, and they're only visible in Jimin's scene. I'll bet his character will be the first to figure out what the cat has done to him and his friends, because he just has that sort of gift. Now here's Seokjin being pursued by a river of black slime, with more slime looming over his head. Could this be a symbol of his history? Does it represent an endless parade of failed loops hanging over his head? He did learn to love himself in Notes 2, but if the BU wants to be realistic in depicting mental health struggles, then Seokjin will have to deal with the trauma he's experienced over these loops. He's probably carrying around a lot of that in his shadow, and he's probably carrying around a lot of guilt too. Seokjin finds the Magne line in a giant storage room where the windows show ordinary daylight. We see 7 chairs and 7 lamps, which represent the 7 members, obviously, but there appear to be only 6 doors. I found a 7th hidden door here. It's behind the other doors and half hidden for the same reason the 7th horse in Jungkook's scene was turned away from the other horses. This door represents Jungkook and his estrangement from his friends. I also found 2 other hidden objects in the behind-the-scenes video. This table holds a clock with a very small face and what I think is a sextant. Now, I've talked about astrolabes many times, but I haven't discussed sextants before. They're a type of astrolabe with only one band that arcs across either half or just a quarter of a full circle. They're used by mariners, so this sextant ties merry-go-round to swim, and it ties both MVs more firmly to the BU. Now let's get back to the 6 chairs in a circle. Namjoon told us in a live stream that merry-go-round is about the boredom and despair of military life. Those are his own words, and that is the clearest interpretation of this video. We see the members separated and lonely, and even in this scene, only a few of them are able to get together in the same place and the same time. This is very clearly about their time in the military. This interpretation even explains why there are only 6 doors near the chairs. Jimin and Jungkook enlisted together as companion soldiers, so they share one door. But every BTS song and every BU video has more than one level of interpretation. So now I'm switching back to the BU level to discuss this room again. And I'm particularly interested in who sits down and who gets up. A long time ago, we matched our 7 heroes to the elements of Chinese astrology, including yin and yang, which correspond to Seokjin and Taehyung. In the same video, we explained that this system is constantly in flux. It's changing. You can think of yin and yang as a revolving wheel. The energy of yin will be dominant for a while, but then the wheel will revolve and yang will become dominant. Well, until now, Seokjin has been the most important character in the BU story. But we predicted previously that he's going to become less important in the next era and that Taeyoung will become more important. We've already seen evidence of that in Swim, where Taeyoung is captain of a ship and Seokjin's role is undefined. So in this MV, when Seokjin comes into the room, it's only natural that he sits down and Taeyoung stands up. Yin is revolving and giving way to yang. Now let's move on. When Q and I last talked, she pointed out something I hadn't even noticed. She said the merry-go-round MV separates the members into two groups, vocalists and rappers, because we see all the vocalists before we get a look at any of the rappers. This isn't a familiar pattern, especially in the BU. In the BU, the members are normally in a group of 7, or else they're in young maknae pairs, with Seokjin standing alone. I don't know why this MV makes groups out of the vocal line and the rappers, but if you have any ideas about it, pause this video and drop us a comment while you're thinking about it. Yoongi's scene mirrors his real-life story. The flying papers, the lightning, and the cloud of slime symbolize the smear campaign he faced during Scootergate. Notice how the cloud of slime continuously grows, bulging further and further down toward Yoongi's head. Notice how close the lightning comes to his body. Finally, notice that none of the above touches Yoongi. His inner strength lets him ignore all of it. Yoongi's character in the BU developed the same inner strength in Book 2 of the notes. So even though this scene is about real-life Yoongi, BU Yoongi is in here too. You can even see a hint of him in the clothes he's wearing. There's one brief second when the lightning lets us see his plaid undershirt. This looks like the same shirt he wore in the HYYH era. But if you've watched the behind-the-scenes video for this shoot, you might doubt me on that, because when we look at his shirt in color, it's green, not red. Well, I can explain that. When you shoot film for a black and white project, you always have to dress your actors in the wrong colors. That's because everything looks different once it gets desaturated. Red looks gray, green looks red, and so on. Now take a look at this shot from the behind-the-scenes video. Everyone is dressed in dull colors, and most of them are wearing green. But when you see the MV, they look like they're wearing a variety of colors. But that's enough about clothing. I have a question for you. Where is Yoongi's horse? By the time we get to the end of the MV, only Yoongi and one other person aren't connected to a horse. So what makes these two different? I don't have a solid theory, but I have some guesses. With regard to Yoongi, it helps to remember that this is the year of the fire horse. That horse represents energy, change, resilience, and a lot of other great things that Yoongi now has within himself, both in real life and in the BU. And we know he's going to take a lead role in the new era of the BU. That's why he was second in command of the ship in Swim. So my first guess about Yoongi's lack of a horse is that maybe he has fully internalized his horse. And my second guess could be true without negating the first one. Yoongi's scene is about his real-life trauma first and his character's trauma second. That creates a very busy scene. Our eyes keep darting around, trying to take in everything at once. Now imagine what would happen if, in the midst of all this chaos, there was a horse. It doesn't belong in the scene, and it would distract us from Yoongi's strength, which is the point of everything. So maybe that's why the set decorators didn't include a horse. Now let's go back to Jimin again and see him connect with his horse, which appears as a shadow behind a stage curtain. On the other side of that curtain is Seokjin, looking at the same horse but in reverse. So that's another case of mirroring. Now I'm going to run the scene again, and this time I want you to notice that Jimin's horse is moving, while Seokjin's horse has stopped moving. Now I already told you that Jimin is the tracker who sees what others don't, and we're seeing more evidence of that in this scene, because he sees more of the horse than Seokjin does. From here, we can connect Seokjin, Jimin, and Jimin's gift to a scene from Lights. Now, as a reminder, Lights shows the characters getting separated and then reuniting, just like in Merry-Go-Round. but in the Lights MV, Seokjin is separated from the others until the very end. When he finally reaches the other 6, 5 of them are frozen in place, which probably means he's stuck in a different time stream than they are. But even though Jimin is sitting among those 6, he is not frozen. He's the only one who can turn and see Seokjin. Next up is a short bridge scene, which I won't cover in much detail. I just want you to notice that when the horse dissolves, it becomes a loop, reminding us of Seokjin's time loops. Judging by its brightness, the horse seems to be a fire horse, and it dives into a figure that represents our 7 heroes. It's transferring its power to all of them, including Yoongi and Namjoon, the other character whose scene doesn't feature a horse. So maybe the 2 of them have a horse after all, and this is where we see it. Anyway, the scene ends with all 7 members caught up in dizzying whirls, which represent the merry-go-round they can't get off of. And now we get to see all 7 members at once, even though they're in separate rooms and they don't interact. Notice that their order of appearance almost matches their order of enlistment, with Seokjin going first. But Taeyoung's room really should be next to Namjoon's. Still, Taeyoung's room is in front of Jungkook's, reversing the scene from the beginning of the video. The way this scene is shot reminds me of an Ionic commercial from 2021. The commercial is colorful and BTS look happy, but we have the same rooms within rooms effect that's used in Merry-Go-Round. So both that commercial and this video are about time loops. And someone in the behind-the-scenes video for the Merry-Go-Round MV said that this scene represents an infinite loop, which makes a super clear reference to those time loops. But even if this loop of the members is infinite, the scene itself has to end. So Yoongi looks through a pitch-black doorway, and that takes us to Hosek's room. The connection between the 2 of them is appropriate because in the Film Out video, Yoongi was stranded alone at first, and then Hosek joined him. So once again, Merry-Go-Round fits in with an MV that we know is part of the BU, and we have more evidence that our predictions are correct. Now let's take a look at Hosek's surroundings. They're a bit like Taeyoung's, only more complex, with a full diorama of horses going around the walls and a floor that matches the ground in the wallpaper. By the way, what you see on the floor is probably meant to look like a sand prairie, and that could be important. For one thing, Suga scenes in the Yet to Come MV look a lot like a sand prairie, and maybe BTS are hinting that Hosek and Yoongi will end up stranded in a place like that. Some sand prairies appear in Red Rock territory, including the one I just showed you. And if that wasn't enough to bring the desert to the BU, there's this Instagram post from the designer who made BTS's red and black costumes. A collection that began with the keywords hooligan and motorcycle. Imagining the atmosphere of an outdoor performance on a hot summer day, the collection draws on the seasonality and mood of the nomad, as in someone who's wandering and lost, set in a desert where sandstorms drift, like in Yet to Come. Where sandstorms drift through the air, this was combined with biker culture, racing across scorching asphalt. I'm sure Jungkook appreciates that. And the image of the hooligan, charged with a raw and rebellious energy. Now let's move on to something even more thought-provoking. The peephole lens has returned. We haven't seen it since the start of the MV, when a mini merry-go-round floated in an empty room, and we won't see it again after this. So why is the peephole used here? Well, it connects Hosek's character to the merry-go-round in the other room, and he's always been connected to a merry-go-round because of his history in the BU. But more importantly, when a telescope shows up in a BTS photoshoot, it's likely to be in or near J-Hope. That's just one of his symbols. Take, for instance, his role in the 2022 Season's Greetings video. Hobie dressed up like a pirate and posed in a room full of telescopes, maps, globes, and other navigational devices. His role, according to the video, was Mystic Strategist, and I think that will be Hosek's role in the new era of the BU. I think he'll have an almost supernatural way of finding the right path, at least some of the time, and he'll use that supernatural ability to find Yoongi. As evidence, I'll remind you of the D-Day VCR with the peephole scene. Now imagine Hosek holding a telescope in the BU after the cat has stranded him somewhere, and he's using the telescope either normally or supernaturally to find Yoongi. Hosek's scene ends with him and Namjoon back to back with a wall between them, creating yet another mirrored image, and we follow Namjoon into what seems to be the room where Seokjin found the magnes, only it's changed. RM, the real person, sings "My bed is a coffin," and we see a coffin in the room, together with a bunch of extinguished candles. When I thought about what all this might represent, the first thing that came to mind was Namjoon's death in the container fire. We read about that in notes too. You might say his death was extinguished when Seokjin finally learned how to save him. But I think this scene also hints at Namjoon's future in the BU. I've speculated in other videos that when the cat takes its revenge, it might strand one or more of our heroes in a failed loop. In other words, a loop in which Seokjin wasn't able to save everyone from their fates. Whenever he fails in the BU, his loop starts over. He gets kicked back to the original date when every loop starts. But what if, when he gets kicked backwards, the loop continues for everyone else inside it? That would make it an alternate universe that doesn't have Seokjin. But there is one way he could get back into it if he had to. He's hinted in exactly one place that he can travel back farther into the past, before any of his time traveling began. If someone gets stranded in a failed loop, he can come back and reach them and tell them how to save themselves. And guess what? We have evidence that Seokjin did go back to the past. I've talked before about some mini-book notes we still can't explain, and one of those notes involves Namjoon. The gist of the note is that he gets a creepy phone call while he's home alone, and he decides to answer it, but we don't find out who's calling him or why. I've always thought it was Seokjin, though, and Merry-Go-Round might explain what he and Namjoon talked about. Look at Namjoon's scene again, specifically the coffin and the extinguished flames. I think the cat stranded Namjoon in a failed loop, specifically a loop in which Namjoon died in the container fire. If this is what happened, then Seokjin is gone, kicked back to the start of a new loop, but the universe where Namjoon died carries on. Now hold on, because this next part is going to get tricky. I want you to remember the loop where Seokjin saved Namjoon from death. This is the loop where all 7 members have survived, and everyone except Jungkook is healthy inside and out. The 7 members in this loop are the ones that the cat will take revenge on. So it snatches up Namjoon, the healthy one who was saved from the fire. It takes him out of this loop and drops him back in a different loop where another version of Namjoon died because Seokjin failed to save him. Now, it doesn't matter where the cat drops him in this failed loop. The point is, it's putting him in an alternate universe where he can't reach Seokjin or anyone else. It wants him stranded forever. But if Seokjin can find out where Namjoon is, he can go back into that loop by traveling further into his past, before the time when he began to time travel. If he does that, he can contact the teenage Namjoon and warn that Namjoon about the container fire. The teenager is sure to be skeptical, but I can think of several ways Seokjin might convince him to take him seriously. But I'm not going to share those. I'd like to know your ideas about what happens next. Pause the video if you like and drop me a comment. Even if you don't have any ideas, you can still ask me nicely for an explanation and I'll tell you more of my thoughts. Well, I still can't explain the lack of a horse in Namjoon's scene, but everything I said when I discussed Yoongi's scene applies to Namjoon's as well. So now we can move on to the scene where Namjoon reunites with the others. The reunion itself doesn't require explanation, but the last shot of the MV certainly does. Are we supposed to think that after our 7 heroes returned from being stranded alone, that they're still stranded together in outer space? Well, that would make for a great cliffhanger in Book 3 of the notes, whenever that comes out. But that's not the only possible interpretation. Who says the scenes in this MV appear in chronological order? We've predicted from the start that the cat will separate our heroes across time, space, and the multiverse. So I think the final scene in Merry-Go-Round is meant to shock ARMY who don't follow the BU as closely as you and I do. For all the BU enthusiasts, this is just an interesting development, or even a confirmation of something we already believed would happen. Personally, I think it's a confirmation that the cat will strand some of the members on other planets. We've been seeing other planets at least as far back as the debut of the BTS Universe game. But I admit I could be wrong. Maybe this really is a cliffhanger ending to Notes 3. And as much as I hate cliffhangers, having the guys stuck in outer space is an exciting cliffhanger and one I'd kind of like to see. Now, one last thing. Have any of y'all seen the cult classic movie Dark City? If you know, you know. Well, that's a wrap. As always, I invite you to drop a comment below. I enjoy reading them and I respond to everything. Thanks again for watching, and Apo Bang Po.